Hello, everyone. We are doing the Jodi trial, and we're still with Alice, well, Grumpy Face.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know if you were watching this weekend, but this continues to be the psychotherapist or some sort of
The Snow White
therapist.
lady.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, and she is apparently testing the Jesus level in our very favorite prosecutor. But I think they're getting ready to go into smexy stuff, which how uncomfortable to go into smexy stuff with this chick.
Funny.
Yeah, so it's interesting and it's ladies' day here, so obviously, Nick and Dave don't count in the likes, and since we're ladyists, we pull our likes together as a collective, as always. Just kidding.
How are we hmm, okay. I'm going with the flow. I'm just going with the flow. Okay.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
How are we sounding?
I hope we're sounding great.
I love that Nick and, Dave have this much faith in us, but they underestimate my ability to cock the very simplest, technical things up. So, without further ado, let's get back to Angry Elf. I think I've got everything boosted, so if the court sounds too high or too low, let me know, guys.
Behave.
We don't, you understand that your standards, personal standards are unimportant here, correct?
Okay.
But you keep interjecting it by saying, if it were me. Do you agree then that by you saying, if it were me, you are attempting to interject your standards here, right?
I misspoke.
When with regard to your standards, in fact, there was an issue that was created in this case because of your standards, wasn't there?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Do you remember that you told me in our interview that you didn't ask certain questions of the defendant because you were old-fashioned and you were embarrassed?
Oh, it's sexual questions?
Ma'am, isn't it true that you told me that you were old-fashioned, yes or no?
There were sexual questions I did not ask because they do not come easy to me to ask. Yes, that's true.
It was much more strong than that. You indicated that you were old-fashioned, yes or no?
Yeah, I'm old-fashioned.
And because you were old-fashioned, that restricted you in asking the defendant certain questions involving the sexual aspect of Mr. Alexander's and Mr. Alexander's relationship, right?
I read about them.
Ma'am, I know you want to tell me that you read about them, but isn't it true that you did not ask her about them, right?
I asked about them later, after I had spoken with you, after our interview
We
in
have.
November. There was a sex tape. I did ask her questions.
Welcome,
I'm not
Flash
asking
Fan.
about the sex tape, ma'am. I'm asking.
There were questions I did not ask
Hiya,
during
GP.
that I had not asked when you and I had our interview. And there were questions I asked after that.
Isn't it true that, first of all, you told me that you were old-fashioned, right?
Well,
After that, isn't it true that you are now telling us that you then went to talk to the defendant, right?
I asked her some questions.
You did go to talk to the defendant after our interview, right?
Correct.
You were still old-fashioned. You were even older when you went to talk to her, right? Afterwards.
I was,
Ow. Ouch. He's like, not only were you old now, but you were older then. Oh my God. She's never gonna be your friend now, sir.
Well, your standard of being old-fashioned hadn't changed from the first time to the second time when you went to visit her, had it? Yes or no?
My standard changed because I was exposed to a lot of things that I needed to find out about.
So now you're saying that when you went back to talk to the defendant, you were no longer old-fashioned in your approach to this assessment in this case.
You haven't defined old-fashioned, and
Well, ma'am,
maybe you need to do that for me, or maybe I need to do that for you.
ma'am, isn't it true that you were the person that used the word old-fashioned during our interview, correct?
Right, but I don't know that you understand what I mean by it.
Isn't it true, yes or no?
Uh, Flash fan, this is the Jodi Arias-trial. So Jodi Arias is the one kind of up on the far right-hand side. She's got her arm out right now. She's the furthest away from the guy who's dressed up like Grimace for some reason, and,
Sorry.
she, at this point, is alleged to have unalived her boyfriend, because he attacked her, but this is after she claimed that ninjas did it, and she had nothing to do with it, and, well, taking photos of herself dragging his body. So this is a fair I think this is a 20-year-old case. So, we are just Nick and Dave have been going, over this trial, and it's really interesting to see how very clean and sort of no shenanigans this prosecution has been, even though he's loud and or 10. See? It's really interesting because we really notice a lot of things that have changed, maybe because a lot more trials have become media circuses and different things. So it's interesting to see how uh, differently trials have been run, in the intervening years. And this particular woman is a psychiatrist who was brought on by the defense to sort of bolster the theory that Mr. Alexander, the boyfriend that Jodi unalived, had abused her, therefore kind of giving her a self-defense. Any
Sorry. I just got a bunch of client phone calls like
Oh,
back to
no
back.
problem.
Um,
I just didn't
so I'm a
wanna
little
be
frazzled.
the only
I'm a
one
little frazzled.
talking. I just didn't
Sorry.
wanna be like, "She's always talking."
I did notice there was lots of blood.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. She did a little bit of overkill from what I hear. Right?
Yeah. I think she both shot and stabbed.
Yeah. Why was she mad at him? Because he was going to break up with her, or he did break up with her or something?
Well, so Jodi was, to put it crassly, a rental, and nothing parties like a rental, but she wasn't a wifer.
Yeah.
She was a party van, if you will.
But
So
she like converted for him, right?
yeah, but then she also engaged in very non-Mormon behavior,
Yeah.
the whole smexiness stuff. So he kept a hold of her, but he was looking for a good Mormon wife too. So I don't know if she'd just never been the person to be left before, and she'd
Yeah.
always been the leaver and not the leavee, and this had just completely blown her mind, or she thought, "Hey, if I just keep going around, he's gonna see that I'm, you know, wife material." I don't know,
Was
because
she
she had
diagnosed
other
with
guys.
anything?
Histrionic, Amber Heard disease. So I believe
Okay.
histrionic and borderline personality.
BPD. Okay.
Yeah.
That kind of makes sense. The freaking out about leaving then.
Yeah, I mean, if she hadn't been so crazy, I could understand and feel really bad for her, because when people with BPD lose someone, I mean, it is tantamount to a death or something that really, is very traumatic for them. But she is just all the ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean that's taking it a little far, right?
Yeah, and
You
and
can always
Travis
get
did
help.
not. Yeah, and Travis did kinda keep her on the side and string her along. I'm not gonna deny that. I mean, he definitely, was like, "Hey, I need a moped to ride, not around my friends. If possible, you wanna come over late at night, we are not gonna
Yeah.
be any sort of relationship, but maybe, possibly one day," just stringing her kind of along. So, not that he deserved to be stabulated for it, but he
Right.
definitely sent mixed messages. about
And
what he wanted.
that's real risky behavior to be displaying with somebody with BPD.
Yes.
So there's that.
I'm not sure that those are official Mormon canon, but I'm not a Mormon, so
I've heard there are loopholes though.
I have, but then I've also heard from real practicing Mormons that that is not a thing.
Maybe they're just maybe you've just only talked to the really like good ones.
The good ones,
Yeah.
not the so, like, the Shiite Catholic Mormons and not the,
Yeah.
Methodist Mormons.
Exactly. Yeah. Not the loopholers. No loopholers.
I think we have a new merch line, guys, for when you get back. Loopholers.
Loopholers. I like it.
Oh, Lord, what is this woman gonna learn about? I'm sure her and Jodi are gonna learn all the smexy things.
Know that you were the person that used the term old-fashioned,
Oh,
correct?
God.
Yes,
And isn't it true that during that time when you used that phrase old-fashioned, you indicated that you were inhibited in your questioning of the defendant?
I said I hadn't asked her if she used KY or not, or
Do you
who
wanna-
brought it, if that's what you're asking me. I did not specifically ask, did you bring KY or did you bring Astroglide? I did not do that.
Ma'am, isn't it true that that's not even, well, why don't we
Well, I guess it wasn't like, "Did you bring Pam spray?" Or
Oh
bless
man.
her
I did
heart.
not expect that to come out of her mouth.
She's like,
Fun
"What's your
times.
favorite brand?" Yeah, oh lord, this is gonna get even better, I just know it.
Yep.
be quiet so that you can take a look at it, listen to it, okay?
Hello, Christine. And, okay, McKinley, what do you think about her three-year-old hairdo over here? Eh, the mind boggles.
You mean Jodi?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's real weird. It has made me like watching this though has made me think that like I need to get my 4-year-old daughter some bangs.
Yeah,
So it
but
has done
did
that.
you notice that Lori Vallow did the same thing with the little baby ponytail? Like, that both she and Lori reverted to these really preschool hairstyles?
Oh yeah, no, I remember only one weird Lori Vallow hairstyle, which was like the half up. I think I remember
Yeah.
something like that, like the half up
Well, she
ponytail.
yeah, but it was like this really teeny tiny one almost, and it was just
Weird.
not to mention well, but Lori Vallow is her own special blend of weird.
She is a little bit, huh?
Yeah. God, if we got these 2 in a room, just imagine the weird BS that they would go into.
I think her lawyer also has like really a lot of bangs.
She has the claw hammer unibang, so it went
Yeah,
all the way
the
through
giant
here.
fringe.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Jodi's pretty though.
She is very pretty. I mean, she's aged wonderfully for being in prison. I just it's a little off-putting. I mean, you can't hear every sordid detail about someone's, lady bits and then look at them in granimals. It's just weird.
Yeah. Luckily, I've like missed all of that part. So
Well, it was you missed the phone smexiness. It was
what
uncomfortable.
do you mean?
The
It
poor
was like
court
they had
reporter.
it.
Yeah.
What? Oh God, that's embarrassing.
Yes. Nicholas Starro, you knew what would happen when you invited 2 chicks on.
Yeah. Are they still talking about the KY? They are.
I think they're talking about the recording, and if they can play the recording in which the therapist goes on about her discomfort and then the discomfort not leading her to investigate certain avenues.
Okay. Interesting.
Ma'am, one of the things that you indicated was that there was this issue about astroglide or KY. Do you remember your response just now?
Yes.
Ma'am, isn't it true that when we were talking about this being old fashioned, we weren't talking about that. We were talking about something else. And the answer is yes or no. Do you remember?
May we approach? I can't do it without speaking. Yes, may approach.
It
They're
does
having
seem
some
odd
problems.
that you would get a sex negative, therapist
Right?
even for a case like this.
Seems very
I don't
odd.
know. But she might have been the only one with the sort of pro-believe all women approach at the time.
Yeah.
May continue.
And you indicated that in conjunction with our conversation involving being old fashioned, something about KY and astroglide. You said something about that, right?
Yes.
Isn't it true that we were actually talking about something else? Do you remember, yes or no, that we were talking about something else?
No, I don't remember.
And isn't it true that we were talking about anal sex? Do you remember that now?
We were talking about anal sex.
No, I'm asking whether or not you remember talking about anal sex in conjunction with the fact that you were old fashioned.
I don't remember putting those together. I remember we talked about anal sex.
All right, well, let me go ahead and
Oh.
play the tape for you, and maybe that will refresh your recollection, okay?
Yes, I'd love to hear a recording about this.
Yes, please. I'm dying.
And guys, please go subscribe to Vielhammer Media. He is doing a lot of work, kind of audio remastering a lot of these trials and making them listenable and just easier to consume. So he is doing yeoman's work on these trials.
Let's see what the prior to it being played. I see that there's a transcript.
Yes, you may.
Oh, I love the bows. It's the old bows.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. What bows?
They do all the recording on a old bows like you put a CD in.
Oh, okay. Like this audio. I thought you meant like hair
Yes.
bows. And I was like,
no,
wait, I
sorry.
missed those.
BOSE.
Okay.
Look, I am only going to do the pulling up of chats and stuff. I don't trust me to try to do a poll. There are only so many things I trust me to do. For the love of all that is holy.
We are going to take one, this will only take approximately a minute, then we'll move on to another area.
Okay.
Did you ever discuss the sex with Miss Arias between her and Mr. McCartney?
She said they had normal sex and that, and this is once again, I can't recall if it was Bobby Wise or Mr. McCartney that they attempted anal sex once, but that it was, you know, she didn't like it.
This attempt at anal sex, whether it was consummated, did you say it was consummated or not?
I didn't ask if it was consummated.
Okay, this anal sex, was it at her insistence or his request? Whether it's Mr. Juarez or Mr. McCartney?
I didn't ask.
Why not?
Oh, maybe I'm just old fashioned. I don't know. I didn't ask because she said she didn't like it.
Well, not that this seems like a good time, but thank you, FlashFan85, for our $1.99 super chat. I can always count on you or LawTube to cheer me up. Not sure I should have slotted that there. But I didn't want to miss it or forget about
Yay for
it.
cheerful.
As opposed to Abby Normal Mexi time.
Yep.
Oh no.
That was your
Oh,
voice
she
on the
is
tape,
cutting
correct?
dagger eyes at
Correct.
him.
And that's us talking
Wow,
about anal
yeah.
sex, right?
Correct,
And that refreshes your recollection as to it, correct?
correct.
Which,
Time,
What?
please
He
be
does not have to
designated
do
area
that.
at 1:30. 1:30. Please remember the admonition. Have a nice lunch. You are excused.
Oh, she was saved by the
Let me
bell.
step down. Let me step down.
For sure, WD-40.
For the record, show the
Yes.
presence of the defendant and all counsel. The jury is not present. We are completing the hearing we began this morning. The witness has had an opportunity to review Exhibit 604. Ms. Wilmot, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Violet, you had a chance to review the interview between Detective Flores and Bill Arias,
Yes, I did.
and were you able to view the entire interview?
Yes, I did.
And specifically, you were asked questions earlier by the prosecutor about a 9-second clip of that interview. Were you able to put that 9-second clip into context?
Yes, I was.
And putting that into context, did you,
And just to go back to Saturday, this is about the interview that was done with Jodi Arias's father, in which he asserted that at the age of 14, I think she was in trouble for maybe weed or devil's lettuce use. They, to try to scare her straight, called the cops. And ever since then, he puts forth or purports that she has never been honest with them.
Oh, yes,
She's
yes,
been
yes. I
very
remember that.
secret. So
Yeah.
I believe that she now has this particular therapist has now watched the entire recording in context so that she can maybe have a little bit more of an opinion on whether him saying Jodi was a liar was a real thing
Okay.
somehow.
do you see that right prior to that, that the interview, Mr. Arias is talking about Jodi as a teenager,
Yes,
and that Jodi was in trouble with her parents
yes,
because she had marijuana?
yes,
And because she was in trouble, did they search her room?
yes,
And that after that, is Mr. Arias describing after that that they searched her room, that Jodi felt like they were nosy parents.
yes,
And after that, she hid things from them, didn't talk to them.
absolutely.
And then after all of this context we talk about, after that is where we hear the 9-second clip about since she started not talking to them as much, that she basically, the 9-second clip that she lied to them since then, and she was about 14 then.
Yes,
Putting that in context with what Mr. Arias was talking about as Jodi as a teenager, does this make any difference to you in your ultimate assessment of domestic violence?
No, it doesn't.
Does it, something that she did as a 14-year-old girl, as a teenager with her parents, does that have anything to do with or change any of the evidence that you've seen with regard to her truthfulness when you're assessing a relationship between Ms. Arias and Mr. Alexander?
No, it doesn't.
Does it either help or hurt your assessment?
It neither hurts or helps my assessment.
All right, thank you.
I will say
Anything else?
something.
This argument, thank you.
All right,
Irrespective of what Ms. Violet say, and with due respect to her position, this appears to be a case where there was shoddy work that was done on her behalf. And one of the aspects of that shoddy work that she did is in taking the defendant's word in this case about the events. There was only one person that she talked to, the defendant, and that was for 44 hours.
Damn.
Gauging or in looking at that statement provided to her by the defendant, this person made the assessment that she was telling the truth. Anything that goes to whether or not the defendant was telling the truth is relevant. I understand that she says that it didn't factor into her assessment, but that's not the inquiry. The inquiry is whether or not there's something out there that may be considered or may cast doubt upon her opinion. Certainly the fact that we have evidence already that at that time, at around the age of 14, the defendant saw herself as a victim and never was the victim of abuse, according to the evidence that you just received. It's about that same time that this defendant then begins to be
In this
dishonest with her
moment,
father.
Dave, he sounds less
And it's-
angry.
Even though this witness here says it didn't affect my opinion, that may be so. That may be legitimately what she believes, but her opinion is flawed. And it's flawed because she took the defendant's statements into
That's so
account
rude.
without really filtering them.
What's so rude?
That he says that her opinion is flawed.
Okay, I guess my question would be, though, if she's come up with this opinion and she's only taken Jodi's
Oh no,
word
it's
for
for sure
anything.
flawed. It's
Oh,
for sure flawed.
okay.
I was being what is that word? Sarcastic.
Sarcastic. Oh, okay. I was just making sure you were. I was like, oh, well, I want to hear if you see it differently. I would love to hear how
No.
you see it differently.
No,
Oh,
it's definitely flawed. How many hours did he say, like 42 hours or
40,
something crazy?
44. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Adequately for the truth. And so I believe that it is relevant and should come
Would
in.
you stop purring into the microphone?
Your Honor, this 9-second clip absolutely is not relevant, and in fact, it's overly prejudicial under 414-2043. The reason being is, first of all, the state is continually trying to characterize or mischaracterize Ms. Violet's testimony by claiming that she only took into account Ms. Arias's words during her interviews. That is not the case, and I don't know how often Ms. Violet can say it that it's going to change anything, because she keeps continuing to tell the prosecutor that not only did she take into account what Ms. Arias told her, she took into account multiple levels of information, including Mr. Alexander's own words. She also talks about the fact that there is no evidence at the time that she's assessing this domestic violence abusive relationship. There is no evidence that Ms. Arias was being deceitful in any way. In fact, she's talked about the only person who's deceitful.
Ma'am, I don't mean to cast aspersions on your client, but she's already lied like 97 jillion times in this case.
Yeah, well.
She's like, right before trial, she'd never lied to this chick.
Yeah. Well,
Jodi, deceitful? How dare you?
how dare you?
People has been Mr. Alexander during this time. So, and the second thing was that the state talks about, continues to mischaracterize the evidence that Ms. Arias was not a victim of abuse. there is no such evidence. In fact, the evidence is quite contrary to that she was a victim of abuse as a child. So that state should be precluded from continuing to say that as though it's true, because it's not. The fact that there is something, this one tiny little piece of information from her father, a father who quite frankly has a motive to not be truthful because he's the one who is abusive, a motive to not paint Miss Arias in a good light because of what.
Okay, legal question for you. She is out and out accusing her father of being abusive here. And
Mhm.
does he have any legal recourse, to say, hey, none of this is true? Or, I mean, she's basically disparaging him on a national stage.
Yeah,
Does he
I
have any
mean,
recourse? Or
sure,
is this
he
just something?
could, but it would be worthless, right? Because
Well,
she's
yeah.
like in prison. So the only thing that you would get, like, so he could sue her for defamation, I guess. But that would be really silly because she's in prison. So you're not going to get
Or could he
anything. I
contact
guess just
the
to clear his name.
prosecution and say, "Hey, I'd like to testify and bring in evidence of all the craziness she pulled."
Oh, yeah. He
But, I
could
mean,
contact them always, but like they don't have to let
yeah.
him.
It just it seems very disingenuous and upsetting to me that they're only going after people that can't defend themselves. Now,
Yeah.
granted, abuse is terrible, and I don't want anyone to go through it, but you're picking on a guy who has been dead and then a dad who, probably will not take the time to sue his daughter.
Right.
So,
It's like the Casey Anthony trial. Didn't she do that also,
oh,
I think?
yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And I
What
don't
he
think
has
that
done
he
to Miss
did anything.
Arias.
I don't either, but
Yeah.
This tiny little piece of information that we have is not relevant, as you heard, to Miss LaViolette's assessment that she did 14 years, started 14 years later. So the fact that a teenager was not truthful with her parents at some point has nothing to do with whether or not her assessment is flawed. It doesn't weigh. And the fact is the state wants to talk about that there is something out there that could ultimately go to Ms. Arias's credibility. But that's not how the rules work. And the law is, and evidence is weighed, that if there is something that is so long ago in time and so minute in detail, there is nothing to support it other than what this 9-second clip. If it's so minute in detail, that means it's not relevant. And if there is any relevance, it's outweighed by its unfair prejudice. Based on that, I'd ask you to complete it.
All right, the objection to Exhibit 604 is sustained. However, the state may inquire about the substance in that clip and whether it would have made a difference to this witness in formulating her opinion.
Maybe just have a clarification then as to how the state may inquire so that we don't get outside of your ruling. What is, you're saying that the state may not get into the details, but what is the state allowed to ask them?
Well, the state is allowed to ask if she has viewed this clip and she's aware of the statement made by the defendant's father and if it would have affected her opinion.
So nothing about what the statement of the father was?
Yes.
Okay.
No, he may inquire about the statement of the father, but just not the circumstances that she opined or that the father opined about the defendant's truthfulness and whether that would have affected her opinion.
So he's allowed, okay, so the state's allowed to ask about the father making a statement as to Ms. Arias' truthfulness?
Yes, but not the circumstances.
Well, the problem I see with that, Judge, is that then it makes it sound like it's more important than it is. If the state's allowed to talk about her own father talking about her truthfulness, because it's her truthfulness as a teenager.
It's similar to the restrictions that were placed on this witness with regard to other information she considered informing her opinion. If you're not going to object to the prosecutor putting in the tape or having her explain it, then that can happen. But I believe that the state is entitled to question the witness about this aspect in light of her prior testimony regarding what she considered important in forming her opinion about the defendant's truthfulness or credibility.
Okay, I'm not asking for details, but what I would ask is that it just be qualified so that it's an accurate statement that her father made a comment about her truthfulness as a teenager.
Except that's not what he said. He said, since that time, she's never been truthful with us.
Right.
So it's not about how can we both watch the same recording and she gets when she was a teenager, and both you and I hear she's never been truthful with us since.
Well, I think it's like selective hearing or something.
Ah. I was just making sure I wasn't the only one that heard that because I was like, maybe.
Appropriate.
Yeah,
From the
no.
state, what do you intend to elicit with regard to Exhibit 604?
I would like to ask
Hold on. Go ahead.
if she has reviewed this clip, that this clip indicates or involves the father, and that the father has questions as to the defendant's truthfulness, and that this statement involves the defendant at the age of 14.
That's fine, Judge.
Okay, let's bring in the jury.
Please stand for the jury.
Record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Mr. Martinez, you may continue.
Ma'am, you've had a chance to review a statement by the defendant's father to Detective Flores, correct?
Correct.
And specifically, you have had a chance to review a portion of that statement involving the father's characterization of his daughter in terms of her truthfulness, correct?
Correct.
And there is an issue with regard to her truthfulness with regard to the father, correct, involving the defendant.
Correct.
And this issue that he has with her truthfulness is referenced with regard to the age of 14, correct, and onward.
Correct.
The issue that we discussed previously involving the defendant being a victim portraying herself as a victim, even though there was no abuse, isn't it?
Objection is mischaracterizing the evidence.
Approach, please.
Ah.
The defendant likes to play the victim, right?
Correct.
And one of the things that you told us about this particular incident was that this was when they were teenagers that she was referencing this, correct?
It was actually when she was younger than that.
Well, you indicated previously when you testified that they were teenagers, yes or no?
I thought they were teenagers. I was incorrect.
Well, ma'am, isn't it true that that's what you told us previously? That's all I'm
Yes,
asking.
yes, it is true.
And so this indication that you gave previously that they were teenagers is about the same time that the father made the statement about his daughter's lack of truthfulness, correct?
Objection, foundation, knowledge.
Overruled.
Right?
I gave the wrong age, Mr. Martinez.
I'm not asking you that, am I?
Well, you're asking me to put those
Ma'am.
two things together, Mr. Martinez.
Isn't it true that previously, before the break, and whatever it is that you did during the break, you took,
Objection recommended.
Sustained.
previous to the break, you testified that this incident involving Zena Carranzo occurred when they were teenagers, yes or no?
Yes, I did testify to that.
And isn't it true that the father's statement about the lack of truthfulness references the age of 14, correct?
Yes, but
I understand that, thank you. Now, ma'am, with regard to certain things, you told us with regard to the interview that you did go back and you did talk to the defendant about certain things, right? Specifically the anal sex, right?
I talked to her about the lubricant.
No, but my question is, do you remember that we played the clip? And the
Yes.
clip involved anal sex, right?
Right.
And you told us before the break, well, I went back and I talked to her about the anal sex, right?
I talked
He
to her
just wants to
about the
say that
anal
word a
And
He
bunch
so
of
does.
you
times
did go
before.
back then
He
and
really
you talked to
does.
her sometime afterwards,
It's kind of
right?
creepy.
specifically about the lubricant.
When you say specifically about the lubricant, you didn't talk to her about the anal sex then?
I talked to her about who brought the lubricant, as you asked me in our interview, who brought that you thought was important. So I went back and asked her about who brought the lubricant for the anal sex.
I'm
Is it like a BYOB thing?
Yeah. She's like, you thought it was important, so I made sure to ask. What the hell?
It's like he brought Glide and she's more of a KY girl. So next time they just brought for the love of all that is holy.
Jesus.
And sir, we get it. You like that you can say anal sex like in a courtroom. I get it.
Like
But
real
you've said it
into
about
it.
100 gajillion times now, sir. And this
Seriously.
poor court reporter's face is gonna explode.
Poor lady.
not interested in who brought the lubricant right now.
Oh,
I'm interested in your knowledge about the defendant's dalliance or activities in anal sex. That's what I'm interested in.
all right.
With regard to
Sal,
that
this is your
particular
part of the
activity, did you go back and address that issue with the defendant to get the specifics about that? Or did your prejudices prevent you from doing that?
Objection, argumentative.
Sustained.
Well, you said that you were old-fashioned, right?
Yes.
And did the fact, or was the fact that you were old-fashioned prevent you from going back and talking to the defendant about the various instances of anal sex?
With whom?
With whomever she was having anal sex.
There were different people that she tried. She tried anal sex. She didn't
Oh.
like it. And so Mr. Alexander, as far as I know, is the only person that she had repeated anal sex with.
But my
Oh my God.
question to you is, did you go back and talk to her about her activities involving anal sex? Yes or no?
I asked her about anal sex.
Yes or no?
Yes, I asked her about
So
anal
you went
sex.
back, and after you went back to talk to her about anal sex, did you talk to her about the anal sex involving all these other individuals, or did you just talk to her about anal sex involving Mr. Alexander?
I talked to her about anal sex with other people.
With regard to those other people, did she ever indicate to you that she had anal sex with Mr. Juarez?
I did not talk to her about Mr. Juarez.
So do you know whether or not she had anal sex with Mr. Juarez?
No, I do not.
Do you know?
No, I do not.
Would it be important in terms of this to see who's assertive to determine who initiated the anal sex? If she in fact had it with Mr. Juarez, would that have been important to you?
It's not important in assessing the domestic
answer is no.
violence. It's not important in assessing domestic violence, which is really what I was asked to do here.
So the answer is no. The answer is no, correct?
It would be irrelevant.
Right. And with regard to Mr. McCartney, do you know whether or not she had anal sex with Mr. McCartney?
She said
She said,
that they had attempted anal sex and she didn't like it.
How about with Mr. Brewer? Did you talk to her about having anal sex with Mr. Brewer?
That they were experimented and tried it, and it was not something that either one of them pursued, nor did she pursue it with Mr. McCartney.
But there was at least two, as far as you know, there were 2 attempts at it, correct? Is that what you're telling me?
There were attempts.
Right, I used the word attempt, so there were
Yeah.
2 attempts, correct?
Mhm.
And they never went anywhere, I guess is the point. In other words, it wasn't consummated, for lack of a better term.
It wasn't pursued.
And they didn't go forward with it, right?
They didn't continue having anal sex.
Are you saying they only had it once and didn't continue having it?
I don't know how many times they had it. That was not.
Sir, where are we going with this?
They're real into it.
I,
I think he likes anal sex. That's what I'm gathering.
well, so I think Travis Alexander and her engaged more in backdoor activities, for lack of a better word, because it wasn't real smexy time with all those Mormon loopholes. But
Oh, okay. That makes more sense. Okay.
so I think he's trying to get from her
I
that
get it.
I don't know actually what he's trying to get from her now. I think he just likes making this woman uncomfortable.
I think so too. But that makes sense that that's what they were doing. I think he's also just trying to show that like she did this with other people. It wasn't just with Travis, right?
I think so.
That's the only thing I can figure.
Yeah, I think. To be fair, I have no idea.
Yeah, me either.
Not relevant. What was relevant was that it was not enjoyable and they did not continue it as a practice.
And that illustrates that if there's an area out there to discuss and you don't think it's important, then you won't discuss it, right?
If it doesn't feel relevant to the domestic violence aspect of it, because I was retained to look at domestic violence, that's what I did, Mr. Martinez. I looked at domestic violence.
So if it doesn't feel relevant, then it's a feeling that you have about whether or not it's relevant. And if it doesn't feel relevant, then you don't pursue it, right?
If it isn't relevant, I don't pursue it.
You used the word feel. Do you remember just using that?
If it isn't relevant, I don't pursue it.
And the person who makes the determination, the gatekeeper about whether or not it's relevant, is you, right?
In my assessment of domestic violence, I would be the person.
Right. It would be in what you, in your mind, believe is important, right?
What me and my experience believe is important.
Sure. You, your mind, your experience believe is important, correct?
Correct.
It could be that others may disagree with you about what is or isn't important, right?
Yes,
Correct?
it could, sure.
And it could also be that you may be mistaken as to what you think is important or not important, correct?
Well, anybody can be wrong.
I'm not asking about anybody. I'm asking about you.
Anybody can be wrong.
How about you? Is that a yes?
I'm sure I could be wrong.
And so in this particular case, it could be that with regard to this aspect of the anal sex and who she had it with and how it was initiated, it could be that you could be wrong about its importance, correct?
I don't believe I am.
I know you don't believe that you are, but it could be, correct?
Hypothetically, anything could be true, Mr. Martinez.
But you're saying in this case it isn't, right?
I'm
She's
saying
a
I don't
flat
believe that
earther.
it is.
One of the other aspects that we discussed, or that you believe, is that you are aware of the telephone conversation involving the defendant and Mr. Alexander, where they are involved in sex.
Yes,
And you indicated that you listened to that, correct?
yes.
Did you listen to it before or after my interview with you?
I don't remember.
But you listened to it, and it's your impression that that was tape recorded by Mr. Alexander, correct?
I believe it was tape recorded by Miss Arias.
Do you remember that you and I had a conversation about this interview back in November of 2000 and, I'll give you the exact date.
2004,
November
November 14th.
14th of 2012. Do you remember that we had a conversation about that on November 14th of 2012?
Yes,
And during that time, we discussed your understanding of who had taped that conversation, right?
yes.
Do you remember that you gave me a different answer?
You've got the paper there.
Yes
I've
or
got-
no? I'm asking what you remember, ma'am. Do you remember?
I
giving-
don't remember. I don't remember.
So the answer is you don't remember giving me a different answer.
I don't remember giving you a different answer, but I believe that what you've got on that paper is correct, and I could have, because I didn't know everything when I had that interview with you.
Ma'am, you had already formed an opinion when I interviewed you back in November 14th of 2012, right?
I formed a partial,
No, do you remember that we discussed it and you said that you already had an opinion? Do you
I had
remember
an
telling me?
opinion about domestic violence, and yes, I did.
And in fact, do you know what date this trial started? Do you know?
What date this trial started?
Right.
It started at the beginning of this year.
No, didn't jury select, do you know
Well,
that?
jury selection started in December,
Of what year?
last year,
What year? Give us, is it 2012?
2012.
Right. And in December, barely a month before this trial was to start, you and I discussed your opinion, didn't we?
In November.
Yes, about a month before this trial was to start, right?
Yes,
And during that time, you gave me all the information that you had at that point, didn't you?
exactly.
So what you're saying is you had already done all of this work. You already had reached your opinion, and yet you then went and did some other work?
I did some other work.
Why is it that when you spoke to me, you already had the impression, or not the impression, the opinion that the defendant was a victim of domestic violence?
Because I had read numerous, in the paper, and I'm not sure which is the IM and which is the text.
You had read material.
I had read a lot of written material. I had looked at a lot of the collateral. I read the collateral data, and I believed I had enough information, but I hadn't read everything. I think I hadn't read some of the text messages or something. I hadn't read everything.
But if you already had an opinion, then what's the purpose of going to continue doing an assessment in this case after after you and the prosecutor had an interview?
Because the more information I can get, the better. And if I find confounding information, or I find something, but the more information I have, the better, to create a better context. So I continue to collect information as long as I can.
So are you saying that when you spoke to the prosecutor in November 2012, you were unprepared to give an opinion as to whether or not the defendant suffered from domestic violence in this case?
No, I didn't say that.
Your opinion was complete when we spoke. You said, isn't it true, that in your opinion, the defendant was a victim of domestic violence, right?
Correct,
And you had reviewed whatever it was that you had reviewed up to that time, right?
correct,
And you had looked at all of the corroboration that you had taken a look at, right?
correct.
And based on all of that, you and I had this discussion, right?
Yes, we did.
And it's an absolute opinion that you had. In other words, you weren't waffling when you spoke to the prosecutor about this. You were certain of your opinion back in November 2012, right?
Yes, I was.
If you're already certain about your opinion when you're talking to the prosecutor, what's the purpose of going back? Well, there is no purpose.
Okay, well, he's probably gonna hammer this point for another hour and a half, but it is Tuesday, so it is a shorter Jodi day. So I'm sure he'll go back to the lube at some point.
Jeez.
I just we should have done a counter for how many
We
times
should have.
I'm glad we weren't doing a drinking game because we would have both had cirrhosis.
Yeah, that would have been really bad. Fun though.
I
We'll
don't
have
think
to do that next time.
We'll have to do a rewatch on a Saturday.
Yeah.
But there you have it. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that this woman would have found abuse no matter what, unfortunately.
Yeah, probably. I mean, she was hired to do so after all.
Well, yeah. And but we got to hear this little man talk about uncomfortable smexiness for a long time, and this poor court
All
reporter
creepy.
is going to go home and pray a whole lot. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Nick and MLS, and to Mackenzie at Legally or McKinley. I can't even keep my own kids right. So
That's okay.
at Legally Live. And don't forget that Saturday is a longer Jodi day, so you can get much more lube talk, I'm sure, on Saturday. It'll just be all the lube all the time.
Well,
Do you have
we need
anything
that.
that you are doing
I don't. I was gonna
on your
do
channel?
the Russ trial after this, but turns out my mom has the flu, and so she cannot watch
Oh,
my child. So
no.
I'm gonna go get her from school instead.
Always family first, kiddos
Yeah,
come first, and, yuck, the flu.
I know,
Anyhoozle,
right?
I will see you guys, later. I am going to continue to work on the Groves trial, so I will be doing a live stream once it gets to, Lady Dragonfire Lawyer, but as we are going through, just kind of getting ready to have Lady Prosecutor lose her ever-living poo with these 2, I'll just let it be a video. So I'm gonna close this up, hopefully, maybe, possibly, let's be honest. Cross your fingers and your toes. Here we go.
The State of Arizona versus Jodi Arias verdict, count 1. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action upon our oaths, do find the defendant as to count 1, first-degree murder